Hello. This is an introduction to a 10-part series called On the Threshold. This is part one right now of part one of an introduction. It has 3 parts, okay? Part one is about really addressing this notion that we are, as a planet, as a species, in a threshold experience, and that there is some immediacy to that, so that we can navigate this threshold experience with more consciousness, with much more consciousness. Part two is about deepening the actual experience of being in a threshold experience between one world and another. And then part three is looking how each type here responds to a threshold experience, and how they handle it, or maybe not handle it so well. So this is part one. This is a poem by Rainier Rilke called I Choose to Begin. I love all beginnings, despite their anxiousness and their uncertainty, which belong to every commencement. If I have earned a pleasure or a reward, if I wish that something had not happened, if I doubt the worth of an experience and remain in my past, then I choose to begin at this very second. Begin what? Begin. I have already thus begun 1,000 times. Rainier Rilke. So at this point, it's a widely held certainty, I think, that we are at a significant new beginning, like all of us, an unprecedented one, maybe, a huge evolutionary leap with the potential for a whole new level of understanding what it means to be human, with much more expanded capacity of mind and heart, fully expressed, whole new world. Everything seems to be pointing to this possibility. Another dimension of consciousness is available to us. And not only that, it seems to be a natural, sequential event, like there's an order to this of things, and it is the next step, actually, for humankind. The word is out, for sure. This is not just me speaking here. Indigenous people all over the planet have predicted this and are talking about it happening now. Okay, spiritual teachers, guides, masters everywhere, of all stripes, are referring to these times as an extraordinary event, the coming together of the wisdom of the ages, prophecies, ancient and modern, the forces of nature, all culminating now in this moment, which suggests that this is no random event. This is not business as usual. This is the ending of many cosmic cycles. And these times are referred to as a paradigm shift, the Aquarian age, and even as an apocalypse. Now, the word apocalypse is interesting because it means to reveal. So we are in a time of revelation. And for sure, it's the apocalypse of the evil. Meant to say ego, but hey, that worked. Apocalypse of the ego. We're at a crossroads. We have different choices to make now. As a matter of fact, there is a necessity of new choices that are being thrust upon us. We're on a precipice, and we can't pretend it's not happening. It's a little scary, maybe exciting too, but absolutely inevitable. It's all happening now, and we are an integral part of this happening. How do we know that? Because here we are. It's happening, and here we are. So it seems to be our destiny, human destiny, to be here for this. As the Hopis say, we are the ones we have been waiting for. So we're at a stress point. Stress points are interesting. In yoga, many of you, I'm sure, have experienced it. Let's say you're lying on the floor and you have one leg in the air and you've got a strap around your foot because you're stretching your hamstrings, okay? Your leg reaches a certain point and it's like, okay, that's an edge, it's a stress point. Can't go any farther. Now, are we going to what? Back off, quit, or any kind of like reaction to it that would be resisting it? Or can we actually bring our consciousness in then to the back of our leg where we're actually feeling it? Breathe, pause, take a moment. This magic happens every time where it will soften. It will soften. There'll be an expansion. There'll be some more space in the joint and the muscle and the whatever, and the leg will go a little farther. Promise. Promise. Okay, this is the process of how to open the body in Hatha Yoga. So the old is falling away. We can watch it happen right now. Intellectual structures are falling away, archaic belief systems every day. Obsolete definitions, agreed upon collective thinking, and ideologies that we've just taken for granted as just the way it is. We are in a true threshold experience. We are between now that which is falling away and what is yet to be created. If you personally are experiencing this kind of transition in your life where you're between axes, so to speak, where you're in limbo, the old is falling away and the new hasn't come in to replace it yet, hasn't been created, then I would say that you're right on time. These threshold experiences in the Enneagram are initiated by what we call shock points. These shock points are not just in the Enneagram, that's just what we're calling them, but they are actually built into the fabric of the universe throughout all history. Climactic events of all kinds, wars, falls of civilizations, big and small, etc. Okay, disease, famine, that sort of thing. Okay, shock points are wake-up calls. They shock us, hopefully, into paying attention. Hello, the universe is saying. So big or small, they're designed to produce or accelerate change, either individual or collectively, often jump-starting huge evolutionary leaps. Now, humans don't do too well with change, do they? We both want it and fear it. We have great resistance to change. And that's interesting because this dimension that we're in here is nothing but movement, flux, and change. So resistance is futile. Sound familiar? Now, not too far in our past, this thing called COVID was a giant wake-up call, a major, major shock point. Okay? And it's not over. We've been having aftershocks ever since. Because we had been, we humans, and have been sleepwalking sleepwalking. We needed cold water thrown in our face because we have collectively been immersed in unconscious ego behavior forever and ever, all based in a belief in separation, which has now engendered a culture steeped in greed, entitlement, corruption, deceit, and destruction. We have become addicted to this destructive behavior. Addictions, I'm sure you know, don't just go away. They need one, an epiphany, where the person, or in this case, an entire culture, has to understand that we've gone as far as we can go. We can't go any further the way we are doing it. Okay. And number two, there needs to be an intervention. Shock points are interventions. They interrupt, sometimes hugely, patterns. They interrupt our habits and our routines, and sometimes our whole reality. Now, we ourselves can join in this intervention. We ourselves can align ourselves and flow with the interruption. And if we do, we will grow and we will gain much wisdom. COVID ushered in probably the biggest deprogramming event in history, at least that we know of. We were thrown into rehab. And now we're in recovery. We must stay sober. Realities have changed. Our realities are challenged now. Whatever we thought was normal, whatever we think is normal, challenged every day. Everything we thought or assumed to be true has been turned topsy-turvy and will continue to be turned topsy-turvy until we get it. So it's like we've been thrown into whitewater without a raft. And we're trying to get our bearings. Where do we stand? How can we hospice the dying of the old? And how can we midwife the birthing of the new? Cracks are appearing everywhere in the old antiquated ways. And a new way is beginning to appear over the horizon. You can feel the energy shifting, okay? But like fairy dust, it hasn't settled. It hasn't settled yet. There's no going back. There's no normal to go back to. And it would be very sad if we did, for all of us, because then we wouldn't learn, we wouldn't gain the wisdom that the shock point came, the universe came to teach us. And it's not even a new normal. It's like we need to give up the idea of normalcy completely. Times they are changing. Sands are shifting. So these shock points are meant for us to learn. Yes? Okay, you remember the 10 Commandments, the movie with Charlton Heston? It was like ages ago. I think 1955 or something like that. I remember just being absolutely entranced, just riveted in this movie as a child. And there are some interesting facts about it. So the Red Sea came from the notion, the actual name of the river of the sea, which is called the River of Reeds, the River of Reeds, a very long time ago, the River of Reeds. So what happens in the upper part of the Red Sea, which is the narrower part, okay, and then it gets very, very big as you go down, as you go through the Red Sea, and you can't see across it or anything. Okay, but up at the top, it's on the narrower side, and seasonally or cyclically, these reeds come up. They grow up, and they're huge and giant reeds. And it just so happens that it creates this phenomenon of parting the water. Okay, so cool, huh? Okay, so the Hebrews, when they got to the Red Sea, that's what was happening, not to dismiss the miraculous event, because it was miraculous any way you look at it. Okay, but the Hebrews then went down into the sea and the floor of the sea and started walking across. And when they got about halfway across, the Egyptians were starting to descend down now into that pathway as well behind them. Okay, this story goes. And the Hebrews kept going. They kept going. And when they reached the other side, seemed to be thousands of them actually, but when they reached the other side, the sea started to close in, because this doesn't last that long, this phenomenon. Okay, the sea started to close in behind them, and of course, drowned the Egyptian armies. So we have crossed the Red Sea, in a way, you could say. Okay, and now what are we facing? The Sahara Desert. A desert. Now, I live in a desert in Arizona, so now I know kind of what that means, viscerally, what it means to look out over this incredible landscape of a desert where it seems like nothing's going on, and yet everything is going on. So we are now facing a desert as a metaphor, which is really a vast unknown. Now, the Hebrew people seem to have gone in circles for about 40 years to reach the promised land, yes. And my intent now, my hope now for humanity is that we can learn to cross this threshold of the unknown and not take 40 years. From the soul's point of view, everything that's happening right now is for our soul's growth. It is not happening to us, it is happening for us and by us on a soul level. It seems like human beings only evolve when we reach some critical point, some adversity, some suffering, some stress point. So here we are now, forced into getting present to this here and now happening. During the actual quarantine, I used to refer to it as presence jail, where we were forced to get present. Well, we're out of jail now, but we're still on parole. It ain't over yet. So we're poised now to understand ourselves on an entirely different dimension, a dimension of unity, truth, love, oneness. To realize ourselves in truth as spiritual beings, eternal beings, and to recognize the universe as a spiritual universe. So we have to learn to live in two worlds, spirit and form, spirit in form, and spirit as form. We have exhausted the capacity for ego-based consciousness. The ego is good for, shall we say, survival at best. It's no longer sustainable for even that. Okay? So we are at a great reckoning where all the lies now need to be exposed. And what is the biggest lie of all? The biggest lie of all is this idea of separation, that we are separate from God, from each other, from the planet, from ourselves. There's no going back. So we need to rise now into a different frequency. And that is the frequency of oneness. Even Jesus seemed to know that this time was coming. Even 2,000 years ago, somehow at the end of the Piscean age, there would be this other age, and maybe humanity would be ready. We haven't been ready until now. We could barely even imagine what a world would be like if we created from the experience of oneness, unity, harmony. Be a lot like the song, Imagine, I think. Okay, if business, government, education, finance, health, all systems and institutions, instead of being based in competition, greed, deceit, constant manipulation, into a frequency, a mindset of cooperation, collaboration, and a mutual intent for well-being for all. The energy of Christ consciousness is pouring into this plane. I have come, I have come, I have come. The veil between worlds has never been thinner. We are now standing in the increasing rubble of the human ego, naked and vulnerable, yes, but that happens to be the most fertile ground for transformation. Can we rise from the rubble? Can we remember who we are? Spiritual beings of majesty, of courage and light, creating an entirely new possibility. The process is one of, actually, of letting go. Have you noticed that? Have you noticed all the lessons in your life these days? What's coming to teach you? Isn't it how to let go? Every challenge seems to be calling us to let go of something, a belief, a position, an assumption, a habit, a routine that's no longer serving us, serving our soul's intent. Okay, could even be a house or a car. Could be physical things as well. Quote, when letting go is called for, if we have not learned to do so, we suffer greatly. And when we get to the end of our life, we may have what is called a crash course. Sooner or later, we have to learn to let go and allow the changing mystery of life to move through us without fearing it and without holding on and grasping. I think we're getting a crash course right now, it seems. I'm sure you're familiar with NDE experiences. Maybe you've had one. Okay. There is kind of a well-known one about a woman. This happened in the year 2007, who was dying of stage 4 lymphoma, and she'd been through it. She'd been through it for years and years and years, and finally it came to the time where she did die. Her family was called, and they said goodbye, and she did die. Well, she says that obviously she came back. Wouldn't be able to tell the story. She says that she floated out of her body and she floated up to the ceiling, and she was looking down at her body, and she was realizing how unattached she was to her body. It was just something lying there. It wasn't her. Okay. And that she was leaving the body behind, and she wasn't attached to that at all. And then she kind of started to realize that her culture was disappearing, and everything she'd been attached to as her reality, her gender, her beliefs, her religion, her history, almost everything she identified with. And it was just kind of softly disappearing. And she wasn't attached to it disappearing. So she did come back into her body, and it was a long time. This was one of the longer ones. It was at least 30 minutes or something like that. You can imagine how shocked everybody was. So she came back, she says, to tell us this, quote, "Pay as soon as possible the cost of dying, the cost of the old, to be reborn." So she was telling us to let go now, to die now to the old. Don't wait till the end of life. Indigenous people all over the planet call it daily dying. So we're on the fringes of this great transformation right now. We're at the beginnings of an evolutionary miracle, a radical leap in consciousness, a radical letting go, a radical surrender. And the interesting thing about letting go of old, stale, toxic energy is that right behind it is new life force, virgin life force, just waiting to come in with way more aliveness, way more creativity than we ever imagined. My yoga teacher, Iyengar, said that the greatest creativity happens after 60. Well, I can actually tell you, I believed that when I heard it when I was only 30. But now I can tell you that it begins after 60, but the 70s, whoa, let me tell you, or in the 80s, let's go. You can be more and more creative if you let the old go and let the new come in. Also note that as it grows darker, those with the light glow even brighter. You and I can be that lighthouse on the hill, that beacon. Lighthouses don't go out to the ships, right? The ships see the light and are drawn to it and come to it. This can be us now, standing in our own light in remembrance of who we are, all that ever was, all that is, all that ever will be. eternal beings of light. Yes, we are on a great threshold. Poem called Despierta, which means wake up. There is an alarm clock ringing. It is waking us up from deep sleep. Please don't hit the snooze button. Get up and take the leap. There is so much pain infecting the planet. Humanity hurts and cries. Time to heal with only truth to reveal. When will you open your eyes? Despierta, wake up. Peace is your power. Despierta, wake up. Wisdom is within. Despierta, wake up. Lead us towards unity. Despierta, wake up. Let love be the wind. The whisper of spirit is calling. It asks, will you be my voice? Don't ignore the whisper. It's time to make a choice. Yes. Part 1. See you soon. Namaste.